What does it take to create a vibrant, thriving life? First, the sad news is that Thoreau was right. Most people are leading quiet lives of desperation, lacking in meaning, fulfillment, and vitality. But we choose more. We choose to create extraordinary lives. And the Art of Vibrant Living show entertains you with inspiration, empowerment, and education to create your life into a masterpiece. It's time. Let's vibe up. All right, y'all. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Art of Vibrant Living show. I am your host, Daniel Aaron, and I'm delighted that you are with us, whether you are here now live or by rebroadcast. We have an amazing show today, a super cool dude who has developed himself in fascinating ways, both in the worlds of business and art and athletics. I said both. That was three. Did you follow it? That's what we do here. It's all about vibrant living. And sometimes that means shaking things up or breaking out of our normal routines. So y'all, I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that you are up for creating more vibrancy in your life. That changes the world. And let's get right into it. My guest today, Eric Lacour, I met just last year. He reached out to me because he was coming to the island of Maui where I live, and he does some really fascinating photography and filmmaking work. And we hit it off, and I said, yeah, I would love to work with you. And he did some amazing work for me. And as we moved forward in that creative project, then I learned a lot more about him and his really interesting past with fashion and celebrity photography, and his also working in breath work as I do. So he's really a Renaissance man doing amazing stuff. And I could say lots more, but let's hear it directly from him. So y'all, welcome to the show, Eric Lacour. Eric, welcome.
Hey, what's happening? How are you?
Awesome. I'm so glad you were here. Thanks for being on the show. And before we get into it, I got like 400 questions I want to ask you. You've got expertise in so many different cool areas. Let's start with this though. Would you give just a little bit of the background on, how you've evolved and what brings you to this point in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I just started. I was always in the arts as a kid, and a big part of my story, I'd say, is that I was like an athlete and an artist. So I had kind of felt like there was this conflict in my life between, like, none of my art friends were friends with my jock friends. So that's a big part of my story, because so I literally in high school, I basically was like the starting running back, but I also won all the art awards at the same time, which is kind of funny. But I was not good in writing, and maybe we can talk more about that later, because like I've gotten more into what I was told when I was a kid that I was not good at, and that I should just focus on photo, video, or at the time it was art, drawing, and painting. And then from there, I moved on, went to LSU. I'm here in Louisiana, by the way, and I just went to college. I didn't really feel like I had too much of a direction. I just knew I was good at art, and eventually found photography and, drawing and painting. It was mind blowing when I was able to make a piece of art in just a click, right? And then when I finally was developing, that was back when we developed with film. I'll never forget developing the first image coming up in the darkroom, and I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. And my thinking at the time, honestly, was like, I don't want to work behind a computer. Like, I want to be able to do this, and that. I want to be in the field working, catching, documenting the world. But and now we're behind the computer all the time. So from there, I went deeper into studying and moved to California. Went to Brooks Institute of Photography. And from there, I started assisting different celebrity photographers, and eventually shot a few things. Eventually, I think I had my first billboard when it was like 2000. Let me think, 2000, probably 8-ish, like 2000, like just before the crash, the 2008 crash, right? So when that happened, I literally just had to I ended up moving back to Louisiana. Like I had a studio in Los Angeles and felt like I was, doing pretty well. And then all the clients literally just dropped off. The fear was so strong at that time. And moved back to Louisiana, helped start a website with my sister and other like fashion type stuff, and then moved to New York. So I went to New York and started working more in that celebrity field, right? And eventually I just started kind of getting sick of it. I even, there was a time where, in fact, my recent newsletter, this is an interesting thing I like to talk about, is like the subconscious mind and our body. This will come up later in breath work. And the way I understand it, it's like your subconscious mind kind of hides your pains, right? So it numbs you because it doesn't want to feel these pains and whatnot, right? So, but we also forget things. So one of the things that just came up recently as I was journaling, I was and so in my recent newsletter, I wrote about how I got this carpenter job for a little bit. I was just assisting these carpenters, and it was for the fashion companies, and it really made me sick. Not only was I taking pictures like on the side, I was shooting parties, I was shooting Vogue parties, I was hanging out with people. We were shooting celebrities in a different format, right? So before it was more celebrity editorial type stuff, and then I took some jobs as like a party photographer. So I was like up all night. I just could not live that nightlife all the time. But what made me really sick is whenever I took a carpenter job, and we were building these elaborate rooms, and we're building elaborate window displays for like what do you call it, Victoria's Secret, Versace. I spent so much time in Hugo Boss and like rearranging stuff. But what made me sick was that we would fill up dumpsters of trash, right, of particle board, plastics, glues, just toxic stuff, right? And we'd work for 4 weeks on this project, and we'd go build out a room with, say, it's like a 50s style, maybe even an old gas tank. We could really make anything. It was actually a fun thing. I actually loved it. It was like the artistic part of me wanted to be a carpenter for a little while. I was like, but I had invested so much at this point into photo video that I kind of got out of it. But we would make this stuff and fill up so many dumpsters, and they would use it for like a weekend. Like, I think it might be 3 or 4 days to show off their collection. And then we would have to go in and take it all down with instructions to destroy, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was around that time where I was in the middle of doing it. And I was like, oh, it makes me sick. I'm taking a saw and I'm sawing all this nice furniture apart that we built, these pieces of art that would go on the walls. And it was around that time, like I don't know if it was the chemicals I was breathing in at the time, or the actual, like, the feeling that I had of the waste that we were doing. And there were times where I had to drive the truck to go dump all that stuff. So that being said, what that leads me to is now I am, my passion is to help amplify the stories of coaches and people that are making a change in the world for good, So, and I really do believe like entrepreneurs and coaches are leading the change for better in the world today.
Yeah, nice. Well, thank you for sharing all that. And what a fascinating journey. I think for so many people, that world of fashion and celebrity stuff seems like so glittery and exciting. And for you to actually get the experience of being in it, I'm sure there was a part of it where it was like, oh, this is, so cool. But then quickly it was also like, whoa, wait a minute. There's a underside to this that's not so great. And part of what you said about construction, I think, is beautiful. Of course, I'm always thinking about spiritual leadership and who are the great spiritual leaders of our world. And there's one quite well-known one who was known to be a carpenter as well. And part of what that's all about, right? Carpentry in some way is about building. It's about creating. So for you being someone who's so creative and who wants to give value into the world, there's an obvious contrast between building and creating and, what's going on with these fancy photo shoots that are really, honestly, they're just designed to get people to spend money, right? And there's other aspects to them as well. So I love the way your journey has evolved, and having got to know you a bit and experience your work, I can see how all of that fed into what you're doing now, and that's a beautiful thing as well. Um, so so many directions we could go, and I for sure want to talk about the concept of story, which you just brought up a little bit. First, though, you shared something with me separately that I think would be fascinating for people to learn about, and you said a little bit about it here too. This dual world you were in as a kid, like star athlete and star artist, and for sure in our culture and especially in school, we often put those very far apart. And I know that that was a struggle for you in some ways in your life. So what's that been like, and how did that shift for you?
How did it shift? Honestly, well, one of the people I just like to mention that I'm very passionate about is Leonardo da Vinci, because he was kind of known for this as well, for like being physically fit and also an artist and whatnot. So he was revolutionary, obviously. But for me, where it really changed, where it was around the time I was working as that in that doing carpentry work, and I was also trained. I had just started training jujitsu maybe 3 years before that. So it was around 30, 33 years old. And I'm in New York, and I started training jujitsu. I was training at one of the top gyms in the world, Marcelo Garcia's, and I'm still like a big fan. So, really miss training there. But the point is that around that time, I was really into Miyamoto Musashi, right? So Miyamoto Musashi is if you don't know who he is a famous samurai, and he's known for having 60 duels to the death. And I literally read like 3 or 4 books on him. And in fact, at one gym that I was hanging out with I was not Marcelo's, but another gym I would visit in Brooklyn, Master Skaya. I would tell the stories, which those will take too long. Maybe I can fit one story in here later. But the point is that one of the nicknames I had my hair. I was in my total, I was doing yoga every day, which I still do a lot of yoga. But I had a man bun, and they called me the White Musashi. And which was a cool name. Like, part of me wanted to be like, whoa, why don't I just be this jujitsu badass and be the White Musashi? So my studies into him, it was one day where I was reading his stuff, and it turned out he was an artist as well. Like in the novel, which isn't completely true, but in the novel, he carves a sculpture in exchange for a sword at some point, right? And then as there's some other scenes as well that I'm blanking on, but he has a quote that says, "Every warrior should have a peaceful art as well as a killing art. This is the twofold way." And that is, to this day, it only because it spoke to me so much on a certain level, because I was always like, should I be doing this or should I be doing that? And it's like, no, they're together. It's like, that is the key to me to a balance in life, right? So you can translate that, right? So you're not really gonna learn how to kill. I mean, jujitsu, I learned how to kill, but I relate that to being physically strong and having aggression and being able to take, whenever you need it, you drive. You got to drive forward. You got to be able to push. You can't be passive all the time. Whereas a lot of times we think about art and creativity, which is true. Whenever you want to, creativity really comes when you're able to quiet the mind and just let go of everything. So it's kind of the opposite of that. So finding that balance, right? So to me, it is having a physical practice and having more of a mental practice or a creative practice, right? So for me, at the time, it was jujitsu and photography, right? And so at this point in my life, it's kind of a mix of yoga and jujitsu. I mean, I really just do something physical every day, and then also try to be somewhat creative. I try to write a lot more these days. Now that I've gotten over the cliche that you're only good at one thing or whatever that was, like that's something that I wish I would have learned a lot sooner. So yeah, I hope I
Well,
didn't.
no, that's great. I mean, I love the way that evolved for you. And I mean, it points to a couple important things, I would say, because most of us grow up with this philosophy that life is binary, that it's either or. And as we evolve, we start to get the realization that actually there's a greater level of truth, which is it's both and, right? Both and so it means, yes, a killing art or a martial art, or even if we, step out of that, but just meaning like strength and vigor and physical vitality. And then on the other side, it's also about the heart and love, and there's the quotation that we want to have a soft belly and a strong spine. And I remember when I was a young man practicing judo. I was living in Northampton, Massachusetts, and I would go to the dojo like 4 times a week. And as I would walk from the dojo to the shower room, it was in this big warehouse, and there was this huge poster, and the poster had like some kind of cool like calligraphy design with a samurai warrior on it. And the quotation, I'm sure you've heard it, it said, "Never give a sword to a man who can't dance." Right. Um, and I think what it points to is like, and one of the part of the warrior's creed or the samurai creed is if you're angry, then you've already lost, right? You can never enter into a fight when it's ruled by anger, right? And we could talk lots about that. Last thing I'll say though is I have a friend who's an entrepreneur. He was an MMA fighter for years, like professional fighter. And then the last few years, he's transitioned into being an entrepreneur. And I was talking with him a few weeks ago, and he's like, the thing about entrepreneurship is you don't expect it. Like when you're an MMA fighter, you expect it's going to be hard. You got, this rigorous, physical training, and then you literally get beat up. That's part of how you make a living. But entrepreneurship, it's just as hard. It's just a different kind of hard, but nobody tells you that. So,
Yes.
I mean, I think it's great what you point to, and also that the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. So, being able to excel, and again, you mentioned Da Vinci. What a great example of somebody that said, everything I do, I want to do it the best I possibly can. And, he's just such a testament to what that produces in art and outstanding contributions to the world. So now your work, like if we talk about entrepreneurship, right, you had this great career in the fashion and celebrity world, and now you transitioned because you found that a little bit vacuous, and you've moved into something that's more satisfying, and that's how we got connected. So what does story mean to you, and why do you have such a passion for that?
Mm. Um, let's get to story in a minute because there was so much we just talked about and that you brought up that I want to kind of like, because a big learning for me, honestly, and we're all this is like yin and yang, right? So it's
Mm,
like the more I've studied yin and yang, like we don't realize how important the softness is.
mm,
There's a quote, and you may know it better than I am, but I do. But it's your ability to the amount of power you're able to put out into the world is directly proportional to how well you can rest or how soft you can be,
mm.
right? So it's almost like I think about like bouncing a ball. Like the harder you throw it down, the higher it can go, right? Um, so that was a big learning for me back in the day, or I learned that from breath teacher Dan Brule was really how to relax. But yin and yang, I know people personally that are having a hard time in life, and I don't. I hate saying this because it almost feels like it should be wrong, but but it's also like there's no other way, right? So if there's an up, there's a down, there's a front, there's a back, there's a side, there's a left, there's a right, there's a hot, there's a cold, there's a dark, there's a light. So does it mean that I mean life is suffering, so therefore it has to be suffering if we're going to have some good times, right? I mean, it's probably more like ups and downs at a lower level ups and downs and higher level ups and downs, right? So depending on where we are, what's going on in the world, but um, yeah, it just makes so much sense when you understand that everything's up and down. You're less likely to get upset about having a hard time or about working too hard or about whatever it might be when you understand. That's the deeper understanding of yin and yang for me.
Yeah,
Um,
that's good. Sorry, go ahead. You were going to say more?
it was just that yeah, so and then that applies to a well-rounded human, right? Art, creation, reflection, creativity, ideas, and then there's building, there's the more masculine. Feminine's more of the soft and receptive and nurturing, which kind of brings me to one of the things we were starting to talk about was like nurturing. There could be too much nurturing. There can be too much structure. There can be too much chaos, because chaos is important. Chaos is related to ideas and new things coming about. But you got to take that chaos and make it into order, right? But order can be too restricting too, which brings me to the idea of like some say that the society we have here is the most abundant. Like America is the most abundant nation that's ever existed, and it could be because of this. And we're experiencing this in life right now. It's like we get too much to the left, and then the right's like, yo, like, you're going a little too far, and then we go too far right, which we were before it went far left. We were more, maybe you could say we were too far right. And so they're like, hey, yo, you need to come back this way, so we're keeping each other in balance. And in the same way that stories are used to transform society and to translate ideas, we keep each other sane. We all keep each other sane through talking and through calling each other out. So it's important. I think that stuff's important, because there was one time in my life where I was just like, everything should just be nice and hairy-fairy all the time, and and that just leads to worse stuff. But you have to be open to talking and having kind of rambling now, but yeah.
Well, no, I'd love to bring together a few of the pieces that you said and really echo them, because you said some really profound things in there. And we were talking about it a little bit before. It's not either or, it's about both and. And I think where we often get confused in life, and when we're in a teaching role or a coaching role, or more accurately, when we're in a student role or a client role, we want the answer, right? We want someone to say, this is what you should do. And sometimes that's cool, sometimes that works, though there are no formulas that work all the time, because if your goal is to get from here to here, a good coach or teacher is going to say, well, right now you're a little too far to the left. That means you got to go to the right. But it's going to be different from everybody. And some people might hear that and say, oh, we all need to go to the right. Well, no, you were right on track. Or no, you were already to the right. Right. So there's this great expression I learned from one spiritual tradition earlier. It said, at the gates to the promised land, there are two pillars. And on one pillar is a symbol for healing. So, okay, well, that makes sense. Healing is part of evolution. We all need that. The other one was paradox. And I remember when I first heard that, I was like, paradox? Well, and it's like, what it means is it's as we evolve, we get to hold things that seem contradictory, but in the greater truth, they are the same. And I'll give one example that I learned from one of my yoga teachers years ago that I love. Is like, if we think about energy, yoga is the movement of energy, right? And if I am wanting to put energy through my arm, well, if my arm is weak and flaccid, right, there's not going to be much energy moving through it, right? On the flip side, though, if I try really hard and I squeeze it like this, well, then I'm going to block the energy, right? So like, one of the principles of yoga is it's right action, or just the right amount of energy. So it's this combination of softness and strength. In the yoga tradition, it's stiram sukham. And for all of us in our life, part of what, and I love, like, I call the show's called The Art of Vibrant Living. And the reason I call it that is because it is an art. There isn't one thing like, well, become a martial arts master and then you'll have a great life. Well, no, maybe that will help, but there are other components, and it's an art to see how we integrate all these pieces. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that. I like to say tension restricts flow, right? And actually in jiu-jitsu, I'm teaching white belts these days, and I have a student of mine, and he was getting on top of me, and he's being all tense, and I was just like, when you're on top. So this is cool. This is yin and yang of jiu-jitsu. If you don't know anything about jiu-jitsu, and this is what I tell new guys, I'm like, just on the top, be wide and heavy. And on the bottom, be tight and a ball, right? So in jujitsu would be wide and heavy on the top, so you can just kind of keep yourself even by being and the more relaxed you are, the heavier you're going to be, and you'll hold them down a lot easier. But what's really interesting is that if you do the opposite, if you're on top and you're all tense, you're more likely to get rolled. Like people are going to get out from underneath you. And so the yin and yang of jujitsu is be wide and heavy on the top, tighten the ball on the bottom.
That's perfect. There's like, again, there's no one way to do everything. Life is this constant evolution. I think of that a lot to do with morality too. That's like something I've studied a lot in my life, and why in some way religions are popular is because they try to simplify it for us. And there's a level where that can be useful. Like, hey, it's probably a good idea to say it's a rule, don't kill each other. Like that's probably a good thing to have that rule. However, is it possible that that rule would be not useful at a certain time? Well, that opens up a whole nother can of worms. So I don't know if we want to go there, but yeah, in fact, so let's switch gears for a minute and get into speaking about story, because I know that that's been a big passion for you, and we both love the work of Joseph Campbell. And a lot of my own work is about story as well. So how did you move into that work, and what does it mean for you now as a filmmaker?
Um, well, I come from a life. This is really funny. It's like coming up, it was like painter and painting. When I was a painter, I hated photography, and then later I fell in love with photography all of a sudden, and I was like, okay, I'm a photographer. And then while I'm a photographer, I was a photo snob. I looked at filmmakers like they were just like, why would I do that? I'm a photographer, right? So I'm like, I don't know. It was an ego thing, right? So you just thought you were cooler because you could just do more with one image as opposed to tons, thousands of images. So eventually I got into photo and I got into filmmaking, and I started realizing like the story's almost more. Oh my God, dude, this is the yin and yang of filmmaking. Is like the film, which yang is order, yang is light. So yang would be the film, the video, the picture that you're looking at now, and then the yin would be more the story, or the as far as I think now. I'm kind of just talking, kind of thinking. I hadn't really thought about this. This idea just came to me, but so I realized how important is the yin and yang. They both are so important, right? So I used to just put all this weight on light and framing, and now I started realizing how important the story was. And not that I didn't think it was important before, but I'm also I'm into psychology, yoga, all this stuff, and then I ran across Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. And it's just powerful. It's almost like it speaks to our subconscious mind. The hero's journey speaks to our subconscious mind. It basically, we all, there are things that we all experience as humans. And if you don't know Joseph Campbell, he basically studied all religions and mythologies and found these events that are happening in all and why they speak to us. There's all these events that are happening in these stories from religious figures, but also from mythology. And there's a reason that these things speak to us, because it is us. They all speak to us in different ways. Without going through the whole thing, because there's a lot of different versions, and I have a little bit of imposter syndrome. I definitely don't consider myself I aspire to be a hero's journey scholar, I guess you could say. But in my studies recently, what I really just speaks to me is like just the beginning of it. I mean, if you're not familiar with the hero's journey and how it fits with people, for the audience, is like just the beginning of it. It starts with a normal world. For me, the normal world was the one time that I can remember was when I was in college, and I had just gotten the camera and I just started photography, and I had this internal passion, right? So, and then there's a call to action, and I had my aunt took me and was like, what do you want to do? I was like, well, I kind of want to study photography more. Have you looked at schools? And she showed me the school in California. and she called them right there and like put me on the phone with them, and they were like, well, you should start the session. We have a session starting in 2 weeks, but you should probably do the one because that's kind of soon. And I was like, no, I'm going to that one. I was like, that was my call to action. And I what do you want to say it? I took the call to action. I went into it, and that's where, eventually after I took the call to action to go to photo school, that's when I encountered like guides. Whenever I got into to California, I met friends that kind of guided me throughout my journey as a photographer. In fact, I have a good friend, Jason Barbers a lot. I'll never forget. He's the one who really, he saw my work. At the time, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And he saw the work I was doing with portraits of people. And he took me to his house one day and he started showing me these art books of Richard Avedon and Helmut Newton. And he was like, this, like celebrity photography, high-end fashion, fine art portraiture. And I was just like, oh, so hero's journey. That was my normal like that's something you'll see in a lot of movies is like you start with the normalcy. There's a call to action. It's usually a lot of times it's an internal conflict, or not a conflict, but necessarily a urge or a yearning. Star Wars, Luke Skywalker wanted to be a fighter pilot, and his uncle's like, you need to stay here for a little bit longer. And the interesting thing about that call to action, and this is what speaks to me, because I have a friend, I have a family member that's close to me that needs to hear this, but I don't know how to say it to her, is that basically it's like, this is a deep learning of facing discomfort, right? So she's not taking calls to action. People are giving her calls to action, and she's just like, I'm staying comfortable. And so what happens in the hero's journey is if you stay comfortable, or if the call to action, something happens to you, it's either it comes, like I said, it comes from the outside. It could be somebody challenging you to something, but it could also be an internal drive or yearning, right? So you have this internal, but if you don't see through it, you don't answer the call to action, things get worse. And then you have to, maybe something happens that you have to do it. Like with Luke Skywalker, his grandparents or his uncle and aunt were burned by the Empire, and he had to go. And then he encounters a guide. That's another part of it, right? They encounters Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he has this guide and multiple guides. And then there's the next level is crossing the threshold. Crossing the threshold is where you're entering this new adventurous world. And then eventually you're like meeting trials and tribulations, and it just keeps going from there. Like I said, I'm not a scholar. There's different versions of it. So if anybody wants to send me any info you got on, or any interesting takes on the hero's journey, I am into it and would love to look at it.
Well, I mean, that's great what you said. You get, and it is a big concept, so it's challenging to lay it all out in just a couple of minutes. I'll add in a little bit though, and then flip it back over to you, because yeah, I mean, Joseph Campbell, as you point out, he's really the origin of consolidating this information. And for people that are like, ooh, what's this? I want to get more into this. There's a great video series years ago with Bill Moyers and Joseph Campbell. There's the book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces.
I don't have the actual book, but I found the cover on my desk.
Perfect.
They've been taped up the edges, so carrying it around with me doesn't mess it up too much.
Yeah, well, and it's such a good reminder, because and why all those stories are so popular, whether it's Luke Skywalker or Bilbo Baggins, or any of these like epic films that we love, and novels. There's always this, yeah, as you said, there's this call, and then there's this journey, and then there's the challenge, and then there's the allies, and then there's the villain, and then there's the overcoming. And guess what? That's our life. That's all of us. We're all living some version of that. And so that's why it's so great to see that played out in front of us in film, is we say, oh, that's what's going on. And we make sense of our own challenges and tribulations. And, and you might not say this yourself, so I'm going to point it out to people. One of the great things about your work is you, from the framework and understanding that you have of it, you're really good at helping others make sense of their own hero's journey, right? And I know that that's a big part of what you do with your work. It's bringing your love of the art and science of photography and film and bringing that, and you need that, but it's also helping people understand, where did I come from? Where am I going? What did I overcome? Who are my heroes? So do you want to say anything about how you do that in your work with people?
I mean, that's what I say. It kind of happens on its own. Like, right. I remember it happening with you when we interviewed a little bit. Some things came up that you had forgotten, which is amazing. That's just another testament to talking, right? So when we are going through our story and we're finding these elements in our life, things come up that we forget about, and that's even happened to me today on this call. Like, we think in conversation is a powerful thing that I've learned more recently. And so whenever I do these brand stories, I look at it and I kind of look for these things happening in their life, and I'm not so hard structured that I have to use every piece of it, but for the most part, yeah, I'm looking for that stuff, and people see it and they realize, and that's the most powerful thing about it, is it's subconsciously speaks to us. The hero's journey and story in general subconsciously speaks to us, because we all put ourselves in the place of the character, right? And that's the most powerful characters, are the ones that are believable, the ones that seem like you could be them, and they're experiencing the same things you have. So you have them experiencing the things you have, and then they encounter different ups and downs. But one of the things that happens a lot is, or I have a good teacher of mine, Michael Hansen, taught me was, I mean, one of the simplest versions of a story. It's like, normal. You have a desire. Something is in the way of that desire, or so you want to attain something. Your drive, and you're attaining something, and there's something in the way, and you have to get over that. But also, whenever you get, and this comes from the hero's journey as well, when you get that thing, once you acquire it, you have to sacrifice something. Some sort of sacrifice happens in your life. So it's almost like we have to let go of things in life in general. And like, for instance, if I wanted to do more of, I can't do yoga every day. If I want to start writing more in the mornings or something like that, right? So where am I putting my time? So, um,
Yeah, that's great. And there's more to say about that, but I'm going to pop up here. We got a great question, and I'm curious to get your perspective on this because it's related. So Brian asked, how often has taking immediate action produced positive results in your life, right? And that's clearly part of the hero's journey, when the hero is originally in the zone of comfort, but then something compels them forward.
mhm.
So does the question make sense? What do you think about that, Eric?
I think it makes sense. That's something we all have to learn over time. I mean, that's a tough thing to really say yes or no, because it feels like, whenever it's something to learn, right? So to trust yourself, there's a certain trusting, to trust your your desires, or your judgment of a situation, instead of having to, because sometimes we got to reflect, but we can reflect way too much. Sometimes you can think your way into a hole. So you just kind of have to trust that you're making the right decision, or trust all the knowledge you have from the past is meant for this moment, to make that choice, and to and I guess you could say it comes down to a gut feeling, right? So you learn to listen to your gut, and we all know how we've all had. I'm sure everyone listening to this has had a time where they were trying to make a decision, and they made it based on logic. And they're like, logically, this is here, this is there, this is there. This is a great decision for me. And then you do it, and then you realize, like, oh, I had this gut feeling not to do this, and it didn't work out. And so there's some intelligence going on in our bodies that is higher than our logical minds. And that blows me away too. I love stuff like that. So that's something I get into with yoga. I'll just keep going with it. A study, or not a study, but there's a story, of or the idea is basically that your gut is like a friend. Your gut feelings are like a friend, right? So your friend is a friend that wants to hang out, and he's calling you over and over. He calls you every day, and you never answer, right? So eventually that friend gives up, right? So same thing with our gut. We have to reestablish our connection with that gut feeling, and you do that through yoga, meditation.
Yeah, well, nicely said, and I love the question too because it wasn't there was something specific in the question. It wasn't just how often has taking action produced positive results in your life. It was how often has taking immediate action produced benefits in your life. And part of the way I think of it is just like you said. And if we look at the martial arts perspective on it, right? It's so much about martial arts, and this applies to life training as well, is developing these good habits and reflexes, right? Most martial arts have this part of the tradition called the kata, right, which is the forms, where you just practice the forms. It's not, you're not actually in like sparring in that moment, you're just learning them. And so the classic example is from the Karate Kid, right? Where Mr. Miyagi has young Daniel painting fences and waxing the car, and he's doing this over and over again, and he thinks, I'm just doing this old man's work here. But then he learns that these habits that he developed were to train him, so they're built in instincts. So in the heat of the moment, he knows how to block the punches, right? And so much of our life, I think, and whether it's meditation or breath work or yoga or even art, all of that is to help us develop the awareness and the insight and the intuition, so that when life is happening in the moment, yes, we can trust our instincts and we can be immediate action. And the great thing about immediate action, and I'm really passionate about this because this is one of the things I know for myself. I come from a background of being fearful and careful. Like, I don't want to mess up. And in my family of origin, there was a lot of, I'll just make it simple and say, a lot of abuse. So part of my early patterning was like, I don't want to do what they did, so I'm going to be careful, right? But at a certain point, it's through the immediate action that then we see the consequences, the results, which then give us the quick feedback, which then allows us to adjust. So we evolve much more quickly when we take immediate action. And it also implies this like trust for life and trust for ourselves. Like, I don't need to be perfect. I need to be in action. I need to be evolving. And this is one of the basic things I work with my clients on from the beginning, is saying to learn how to trust ourselves implicitly, and root out the old judgments and ways that we pull ourselves down, and to be able to create ourselves first in our own mind and heart, and then through action in the world. So I love the question. I get passionate about it. And I brought up something in the midst of that, though, that I know is an area where you are very experienced and passionate too, which is the realm of breath and breath work. So since time is flying along and there's so many things we could talk about, do you want to say something about your experience with breath and what it means to you and why it's important for other people too?
I think one of the things that I wish I would have learned longer, that I would I try to tell my students, because I do teach yoga occasionally, or a few times a week I actually teach yoga. So, and one of the deeper learnings of yoga, or that I've learned, it was really 2021, where I did a breath, like it was a 21-day breath workshop, where we lived in a tent and practiced deep breath work every day, almost just about every day, sometimes twice a day, right? And the whole point of it is the deeper understanding is that all of our experience in our life, our body remembers everything that ever happens to it, right? And so there's things that have happened to us. There's also stuff that has passed on, and actually we could talk a little bit about this in a second. Is that the way I see it, karma, the real understanding of karma is like your body's memory of everything that happens to it. But the meaning of trauma is everything that the body's memory of everything that happens to it. So it's those subconscious habits, and to really change your life is to change the subconscious habits, is to and but also release them, right? So to get rid of the old, which manifests as like tension in the body for the most part. I think I see it like it's almost like a numbing, right? So the best example I have is so I'm on my way to jujitsu one day, and I get hit from behind. So I'm taking a left, and this SUV full speed hits me behind. I think he was probably 55 or something. Spun my car and rolled me. Right. So I was okay. I remember I braced myself. I mean, I did have a concussion, but I also caught myself while I was rolling, and so it wasn't too bad. After that, whenever I would drive after that, I was literally like every time I'd take a left, it was like, whoa, like I was nervous driving just in general, but taking a left was the hardest thing for me. And then, but from understanding CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, where if you have somebody that's afraid of um, an elevator, you talk about an elevator one day, and the next time you look at a picture of an elevator, and then eventually you go and look at one, and eventually you get in one, and eventually you let the doors close, and then you ride it, right? So you got to ease your way into it. I I had people that said you need to go to therapy. I'm like, I don't need to go to therapy. I know that I just need to face this thing over and over, and so I just continued to face it, and eventually it went away. But the interesting thing about this is understanding that there are things that have happened to us we have ancestral trauma, like that your body remembers, right? So your DNA literally has subconscious habits, and you don't even remember it happening, right? So imagine in your life you got things that, like, what if you can only take lefts? You always got to make circles or something to take a right. You got to do a circle. So it's taking you twice as long to get wherever you're trying to get. But if you can learn to face that fear, which kind of brings me to another thing. It's like, so in the breath work, a lot of things that came up to me was fear, and you might cry, you have to feel those emotions, right? So the repressed emotions, the only way to get rid of repressed emotions is to feel them, to allow them to flow out the body, and then you make space for um, new habits and feelings. If anybody gets a chance, if you haven't seen the movie, I mean, it blows my mind that this stuff is in movies these days, and it was in the Pixar film, um, where the jazz musician goes to Earth, Soul. All right, so in Soul, you there's a scene where the little soul has all this black stuff, right? So I'm totally screwing up. You'll see it, but in the movie, there's literally a scene where the soul, where it's a monster, and you think it's just a monster, and then these little spiritual guys go and dance around it and do this meditation practice, and then all that black stuff starts falling off. At the time you think it's just a monster, and then all of a sudden underneath it, it's a little soul. And that's exactly how you feel when you come out of a very powerful breath session. It, like traumas, anxieties, uh, um, repressed emotions are like weight, and in fact repressed emotions it takes effort to hold that stuff in. So it's almost like every day we're walking around. Like if you get home and you're tired and you're like, I didn't really do anything today. I don't know why I'm tired, because you might be holding in a lot of hit. Like you're like, it's like you're walking in doing this all day, holding it in. But once you feel it and you allow it to flow. And I mean, this is a big thing for men. Obviously, I was taught not to. I didn't show my emotions for a long time, and I still don't. But I know how to release them when I need to. I have ways. Um, I show my emotions, with my girlfriend and whatnot. But so the one of the experiences I had was in that 21-day breath workshop. That's where I really learned this on a deeper level. My first breath session, I kind of let loose, and I felt that lightness. It's almost like you take these sandbags and just like you've been walking around with sandbags on your shoulders and you did not even know that they were there. You take them off, and that's why you feel like you're floating. That's why you feel like, yeah, people say they feel like they float out of a yoga studio sometimes, because it happens from yoga studios too. um, I don't know if I got off track from what I was talking about.
Well, that's great what you said, and I'll echo a little bit of it. And is the experience that we all learn from childhood is to not feel things, and at a certain point, it's unsafe. Like as a little kid, I don't want to. I can't feel certain things because I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know what's mine and what's other people's. So there's a survival mechanism, which is rather than feel, I push it down, right? And repression and suppression are the technical terms for it. The analogy I use a lot is it's like holding a beach ball underwater, right? And we've all had that experience. We can do that, and we can do it for minutes and days and weeks and months and years and decades, right? But as you said, it takes energy, right? So and it results in just showing up as a shell of our potential. And what happens when we do, and there's lots of different styles of breath work, and I just encourage people to like really go for some of these therapeutic kinds of breath work, the ones where you're doing fast breathing, where there's an intention to heal, to release, therapeutic styles of breath work. When we really do that, the emotions, just like the beach ball comes to the surface sooner or later, it's like the emotions come up to the surface, as you said, so that we can feel them and let them go. And when that happens, it's like, wow, all this energy is released. The world looks brand new. There's so much benefit that comes from it. And what's amazing is we didn't even know that, for all this time, I was expending energy and limiting myself from the full range of emotions in life. And then we realized, like, wow, now I'm free. I didn't even know I was in jail. And it's just so incredibly liberating. It sounds like that's what you experienced in your first time.
Yeah, I mean, so the deepest learning that I got from all this is that understanding of repressed emotions and that understanding of your body, um, remembering everything that happens to you, and so and Sadhguru in his book Karma literally says, he says, releasing the body of karma is the deepest practice of yoga, and like that just blew my mind. I was like, oh, so like we have habits, kind of like whenever I got in a car and I couldn't take a left. There's things that we do where we don't even, just in the same way that somebody might drive to work on an off day. You're like, how many things did you do on your way to work and you didn't even realize it till you got there that it was Saturday. I mean, I've heard stories of doing that, but that happens. Maybe that happens to me when I walk in my office, because I'm working at home. I'm joking, but but yeah, I just think that is just such a powerful. To me, that's what the deep. I mean, if Sadhguru says that's the deepest training, I'm like, dude, that's. I wish I would have learned that so much longer. So in a way, it's like we're getting rid of old bad habits, old stresses, old anxieties, and making space for newer habits. So that's what the use of this, of like deeper breath work and feeling your feelings is all about.
Yeah, nicely said. I often think, because I started with yoga and yoga practice and breath work right at the same time in my life, 1996. And for a while, it's like they were both beautiful paths, but I didn't see where they intersected. They're like, train tracks that never came together. And then eventually I realized, like, yoga is the slow, steady path, and breath work is like the super highway to awaken. It just so much happens so fast. Uh-oh, he's got something for us. And that's good, actually, because then I want to make a transition to make sure
Yeah.
we let people know. You back? All right.
Yeah. I just had my air conditioner was making some noise.
Gotcha.
I had something really that I wanted to say too, and I lost it. So breath work.
Well, I'm sure it'll come back, but
I got it.
okay.
I got it.
Yeah,
So
here it is. Okay.
you're saying, sorry. So
Bring
you're
it on.
saying that breath work is fast tracking it. So for me, like I read the book Breath, right? So in the book Breath, he talks about James Nestor talks about how the Wim Hof method is like the shove, or the violent shove into presence. And right. So one of the reasons for that is that when you stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, you got to think about what that sympathetic nervous system is done for us, right? So it makes you super present, right? It it sends all the blood to the organs. You're not resting and digesting. You're in fight or flight response, and you're like, where's the tiger? Like, I'm ready to run and fight from a tiger. So it heightens your, and that is presence, right? So like a lot of people have a hard time understanding, like, everybody's saying it these days, like, oh, you should be more present. You're like, and then you start thinking about being present. You're like, no, you're not really being present. Presence is more of a listening. It's more of a feeling the world around you, right? And that's just powerful to me. But, so the violent shove, like he said, that was a violent shove. And then after I read that, maybe less than a year later, it was actually 6 months after I read that book, I found out the more violent shove is the rebirthing, brother.
Absolutely, yeah, and and sometimes that's of great benefit to all of us to just wake up, to break out of our old patterns and really see them starkly, and to get a quantum jump. Super powerful, and in the same way, psychedelics can be helpful to people, or they can be imprisoning if they become habitual.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we could go on and on about that. Time is flying along though, and I want to make sure that people know, one, how they can get in touch with you, because I know part of your work, because I've experienced it myself, is this really phenomenal thing of helping lots of people. But I know, like, coaches and teachers especially, to be able to understand their own story and communicate it via this most incredible medium called film, which is so popular and ubiquitous these days. And on that note, you've offered a free gift here. So will you let people know how they can reach you, and can you tell us about the gift?
Yeah. So actually, so a big part of my what we do, and I usually don't do this until somebody is an official deal, right? But I decided for people that are watching the show or that find out through the show, if you just mention that, I'll give you a free story building process, is what I call it. And typically, it's usually, honestly, like when we do a legit one, and it could be a week every day for an hour, but we'll keep it at an hour for this. So but it's very valuable. So we will talk. I'll ask you some deep questions. We'll just do a free story building process, and you can take that story and get somebody else to make a film if you want. You can try and make it yourself, or you can actually use that story, because story is so powerful. I mean, we didn't really get too deep into how powerful story is, because story is one of those things that we can't help but listen to. So in that sense, subconsciously, we can transfer information through a story. We can change people's minds through a story. We can attract people to our business with a story, but we can also, vulnerability is courage. So when you are vulnerable about yourself, people feel attraction to you. If they correlate with your why, why you do what you do, they're more likely to call you up as a coach to work with you, right? Or invest in your business and whatnot, right? So it's all about the why, and there's other parts to the story as well. So like the fight, and then there's the contribution, like what's your contribution to the life. So there's these elements, as well as the elements that we know from the Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, of course. But yeah, so if anybody either messages, hey, I saw you on Vibrant Living Show, or you just go to licourstudio.com and you can book a call. There's a link there.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay. Well, and it's up on the screen now. Your calendar appointment setter. And what's the best way for people to reach you?
I would say that that's the best. You can literally comment on my socials, on my Instagram is probably where I'm um, most prominent. My Facebook was just hacked, so that's not. I mean, please come add me. I only have 23 friends now. I need I need to get my friends back up. And So honestly, if you see my Facebook, I can't access that right now. I don't know why Facebook does this, but somehow I'm trying to get that worked out. So Instagram would be best at this moment, or the link on my YouTube. Sorry, the link on my website, licourstudio.com.
Of course,
Uh,
too. Okay.
but you can, just in case you need it, we got Eric at licourstudio.com would be the email.
Perfect. All right. Well, and let us make the quick transition into the final big question. Are you ready for that?
Uh-oh. I didn't know that. I didn't know about this.
Oh yeah, yeah. This is the totally unscripted, unplanned. Well, the whole thing is unscripted and unplanned. But the last question I have for you, because you've done so much work on yourself, you've invested in so many different areas in creating your vibrant life. If you had to boil it all down to one piece of advice for our audience, what would you say? What's the most important thing for someone to do or not do in order to create their vibrant life?
I think the thing that comes to my head right now, the most important thing to create your vibrant life would be the understanding of what the way I see the true self is actually awareness, right? So awareness, we can move that, right? So we can put our awareness in our thinking mind. The thinking mind's in the future or in the past, and when you're there, you're not necessarily present. The thinking mind, the awareness. You are awareness. You're not your eyeballs. You are that which is looking through the eyeballs. You're not your ears. You're that which is listening through the ears. So you are that which is experiencing this body in your life, in this world, right? So I think a lot goes from there, right? So that can help you be more present, and most of us these days, I feel like it's more prominent every day that people understand how important presence is, how important it is to be able to shut off that thinking mind. So the way I see it, and I honestly didn't read this anywhere because I say this is my thing, is presence is experiencing.
Hmm.
Presence is experiencing. So feeling, touching, tasting, smelling, you that is presence. That is, if you can't figure out how to get out of your head, go to. And I had a friend that I literally talked out of of an episode of, he had some mental thing going on, and he called me, flipping out, and I said, hey, all I did was I directed him to the present moment, because he was thinking about this thing that could be happening that wasn't happening, and this other thing that might have, could have happened, shouldn't have happened, and he was totally delusional about it. And I was like, bro, look, none of that happened. That's not real. So he was in his car. I was like, just feel your steering wheel. Take a breath. Look around. Look how beautiful is the sky today, because I see it. The sky's beautiful. You're not far from me. And he to this day calls me sensei. Since that episode, he's like calling me his spiritual teacher. I'm like, whatever, man.
Well, that's powerful. And I love what you said, that it's, awareness is the key. It's like, there's a great saying in Las Vegas, you must be present to win. And let's wrap it up there. It's been such an honor and pleasure to have you with us, Eric. Thank you for contributing so much. For the audience, you'd be foolish not to take Eric up on his offer of a brand story consultation to help understand who you are and your hero's journey. So I definitely encourage you to do that. And to all the viewers and listeners, thank you so much for tuning in, for being not only interested in your vibrant life, but actually doing something about it. You're learning about this, and applying what you learn is so powerful. It makes a huge difference in the world. So please know that your learning matters, your life matters, you are loved, and it's important. So thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Aloha.
Hello.
Mahalo for tuning in to the Art of Vibrant Living show, y'all. I'm Daniel Aaron, and may you live with great vibrancy.